Is Modern Warfare 3 a triumphant return or a missed opportunity? Well, with early access to the campaign and now in our hands, it is time to dissect the latest installment of this juggernaut franchise. My name's Alex, this is XP Corner, and if you do enjoy this video, subscribe, it means the world to us. So like many of you, I've seen the initial reactions describing the game as a lazy rehash of old ideas with a disappointingly short runtime. While not surprising, I must confess that I usually enjoy the single player stories found in Call of Duty games, you know, their blockbuster set pieces and over-the-top plot twists. Today, however, I do find myself largely in agreement with the critics. Now here, the story it follows Markov, a character intent on wreaking havoc to manipulate states that have recently achieved some level of peace. Basically expect the usual biochemical attacks, a cat and mouse chase, and some impressively delivered cutscenes. Yet through all of this, I rarely found myself intrigued. The narrative feels like a cookie-cutter version of what we've come to anticipate, complete with the expected shocking scenario reminiscent of past campaigns, like think taking part in one of our opposition's attacks and causing civilian casualties. That scene in particular in past entries, they've been stirring beats in pushing the story forward. Here it does feel a little like it's simply for shock value, as very little control is given to the player. Now I wouldn't overall label the story as bad per se, it's just that every plot point seems recycled and it has been executed more effectively in previous entries in the series. Turning to the gameplay then, there are positives to highlight. As expected from Call of Duty, the gunplay remains top-notch. While not necessarily improved, it retains the satisfying heft fans have come to expect, coupled with a comprehensive arsenal of primary weapons, sidearms, explosives, and gadgets that do invite experimentation. Notably as well, a couple of missions do stand out: an intense bunker infiltration to thwart a missile attack, and the opening sequence set in the Gulag. These missions excel because they instill a sense of urgency, with things like countdown timers that force players to make rapid decisions while facing waves of enemies. Unfortunately, however, it's this sense of immediacy and challenge that the rest of the campaign seems to lack. Basically, the excitement factor in the majority of the missions, it's missing. The sense of urgency is artificially injected through repetitive audio cues, and the pressure to act quickly feels kind of, I guess, contrived. There's a noticeable lift of map designs and concepts from Warzone as well, which doesn't translate well to this context. You know, generally in this one, you're encountering two types of missions: the traditional linear missions, which I personally enjoy, and then sandbox style. These are objective-based missions that grant you the freedom to tackle goals as you see fit. However, this freedom is undermined by several issues. The objectives, first of all, tend to be monotonous, and while the approach as you please concept has potential, it's often thwarted by the enemy's almost supernatural abilities to spot you from miles away. It's also coupled with a problem that the game has a habit in these moments of starting you with, simply put, subpar gear. What this does is it ends up feeling less like a tactical operation and more like a Warzone scavenger hunt. Call of Duty may not be a word for, let's say, realism, but this game exaggerates that notion. An example, being sent to a dam with minimal gear only to find an arsenal scattered around you, it just undermines the experience. It's absurd to search for equipment in a setting that should have you fully prepared from the get-go. Because yeah, I think it's fair to say the franchise, it typically empowers you to feel like you're part of a formidable military force, but these moments left me feeling just ill-equipped, which is definitely, you know, jarring when portraying the world's elite armed forces. There's even often vehicles scattered across these maps, which kind of further reinforces they are simply lazily copying and pasting ideas from the massive Warzone, because these could have been fantastic additions to the story, to the gameplay, but they feel largely irrelevant. I used an ATV once, and honestly, I forced myself to do it. The game doesn't even point it out to be a concept, honestly. I just stumbled across the fact I could use one when I took cover behind it, and the on-screen prompt to enter the vehicle appeared. Another issue with the sandbox environments then is the underwhelming enemy AI. While I've already noted their nearly supernatural ability to spot you, this contrasts sharply with their poor tactics and spatial awareness. Snipers hit their mark with unrealistic accuracy from extreme distances. Conversely, however, enemy soldiers display haphazard assault patterns, lacking strategic maneuvers like flanking, and often they just charge forward without any identifiable formation. Additionally, I frequently observed enemies getting stuck on terrain or failing to navigate to my location in complex areas, such as when I was simply ascending a building. These inconsistencies in AI behavior, it detracts significantly from the experience. It feels like they've kind of padded out enemies with armor rather than brains. The campaign's duration is also an issue. Typically a Call of Duty story mode, it spans right around 6 to 8 hours. This installment falls short, it concludes in right around 4, and that's actually accounting as well for a number of deaths along the journey. This brevity then is just exaggerated by the inclusion of poorly executed sandbox sections that not only caused me to lose my way occasionally, but also seemed to serve as, I guess, mere filler. There were times I felt basically unclear about my objectives, but by the time the credits rolled and so quickly, it was evidence that these moments were nothing more than a tactic to artificially extend an already brief campaign. So overall for the gameplay, the traditional linear missions, they were still enjoyable, even if they do fall short of their predecessors. For instance, there's an attempt here at recreating the excitement of All Gillied Up, but it lacks the finesse of the original series highlights. As for the sandbox sections, however, the concept is, I guess, promising but poorly realized. The game attempts to blend classic Call of Duty mission design with elements from Warzone, but it doesn't really deliver on the potential of either. Visually, the game meets the high standards expected from a Call of Duty title with its AAA design. The firearms are meticulously detailed, muzzle flashes are impactful, and the enemy reactions to gunfire are convincingly animated, while the expansive sandbox maps introduces some visual inconsistencies with areas, I guess, that appear less polished. The overall graphical fidelity is commendable. The game's use of light and reflection on gadgets and like advanced scopes and night vision equipment, that is particularly noteworthy. I always enjoyed experimenting with what was on offer. Then, despite a lackluster story as well, the cutscenes, they stand out with their exceptional animation work. The audio quality then mostly parallels the visuals, delivering where it counts. While the soundtrack may not be particularly memorable, it does succeed in underscoring the emotional highs and lows of the story. The sound design for weaponry and explosions is, as expected, top-notch. However, the sandbox areas, the crux of many issues here, suffer from occasional lapses in sound effects. Instances of silent enemy vehicles were noted, and mute construction workers, that may seem kind of trivial there, but they actually significantly impact gameplay because these missing auditory cues can lead to tactical misjudgments. I actually experienced that myself when I mistakenly assumed these areas were deserted, resulting in what would have been an avoidable confrontation. It's a small detail that has a tangible effect on the player's strategic planning and immersion, and it's definitely a letdown when it falls short. So overall, I won't say Modern Warfare 3 is bad, but it is below average, and it's a disappointing entry for what is a fan favourite cast. The linear missions pack a few highlights, and the gunplay, of course, it's as solid as ever, but the lazy sandbox missions that lift from Warzone, they have potential, but they dramatically under-deliver. If they work on the concepts of these missions and build AI around them, they could actually be good, but right now, it's one of the worst entries I've played in a long time. So with that today, it's a below average 4 out of 10 from me. There's a few good moments, but it's mostly an extremely brief distraction from the multiplayer aspect of Modern Warfare. I do know as well, and many may argue in the comments, that's all they ever are, but I'm actually a fan of the single player content, so this one definitely stings a bit. Hopefully there's going to be better news about the multiplayer to report once that goes live, but from what I'm seeing, honestly, it feels like it could have been just minimal DLC at best. So let us know in the comments then, will you be picking up Modern Warfare 3? And let us know as well if the single player content is actually what you are looking for. So with that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, news and lists weekly, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.